Hey, what's party? Welcome back to News Dose, and last week's PlayStation closure just keeps getting worse. Allegedly, some of Bluepoint's pitch projects just got revealed online, and I mean, if this is actually true, and if Sony actually rejected these games, then my goodness, this is a bad look for Sony and definitely for Hermen Hulst. That's not all for Sony, though, because reportedly they also have a big game working on the Switch 2, and this is catching a lot of attention online. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go and get right to things, though, starting off with an early Game of the Year contender being Resident Evil Requiem. Reviews have been rolling out online, and currently, it is the best-rated new Resident Evil game since the launch of Resident Evil 4 way back in 2005. So, I mean, we're talking about 20-plus years, and, in that span, Capcom has released some really good Resident Evil games. I know Resident Evil 5 tends to be a little bit more mixed because of its action elements, and Resident Evil 6... that one ultimately disappointed, but Resident Evil 7 and 8 are both brilliant games, and I mean, honestly, you can make an argument that Resident Evil 7, alongside some of the recent remakes, almost revitalized the survival horror genre. I mean, they've been massive reasons for a lot of the games that we've seen in recent years, whether that be for something like the resurrection of Silent Hill or even the Dead Space remake as two such examples. Whatever the case may be, though, Resident Evil Requiem is absolutely living up to the hype, or at least according to critics. Currently has an 88 overall score on Metacritic, and I'll be honest, I have no idea why it has that score. I have not been watching the reviews, I have not been listening to them, because I'm trying to go into this game with as little knowledge as possible, because again, it is my most anticipated game in a very, very long time. I want to experience it without much information. But if you are interested in reviews, I do encourage you to watch whichever critic you trust the most. I will say this much, though, I have heard fantastic things about the Switch 2 version, just in case you're curious. It sounds like it runs and looks very good on the Switch 2. Now, as for the hype, not only has Capcom confirmed that its pre-orders are exceeding expectations, but I was looking last night and I realized the physical copy for both Xbox and for the PlayStation 5 has actually sold out at every major retailer across the United States. So yeah, the hype is absolutely real, and these scores are only going to increase that, especially if fan impressions are similar. Oh, and speaking of Switch 2 games that are impressing people right now, Fallout 4 just made its Switch 2 debut, and several people are walking away very impressed by how it runs and looks on the Switch 2, especially in its handheld mode. It does have various options that you can choose from, including a performance mode that targets 60 frames per second, though in outside areas that are heavily populated, it's not necessarily perfect. That's important to keep in mind. But that's where things start to become very interesting, because if you want something a little bit more, let's say, stable, it does also come with a 40 frames per second mode as well. And if you've been watching the channel for a while, then you probably know that I've been calling for 40 FPS to be a new standard for the industry for a very, very long time, especially with the rise of handhelds that can play AAA games. I mean, a lot of these modern handhelds do support 40 frames per second, including the Switch 2. So I'd like to see 40 frames per second become a more common middle ground. It's just a nice balance between image quality and stable frame rate. So that's why I've been particularly excited about the Switch 2 panel, which supports 120 Hz. I think it could get a lot more developers to support 40 frames per second because of how mainstream the Switch 2 is, or will be, compared to something like the Steam Deck. Obviously, the Switch 2 is going to sell a lot more. Now, there is also a 30 FPS option if you prefer just raw graphics. Obviously, it will have the best image quality, but in sacrifice of its performance. So yeah, Bethesda seems to have done a good job, and now the Switch 2 is actually possibly one of the best ways to play Fallout 4 in the year of 2026. And surprisingly, that's not the only Switch 2 game that currently has the community buzzing, because Nintendo dropped a Treehouse event yesterday, and one of the games that they showcased was Pokopia. Now, I am a massive Pokemon fan. It's actually among my top 3 franchises of all time, but I'm also not necessarily the type of person that consumes everything that the Pokemon company pushes out. And this really is not my style of game. it's very much inspired by games like Animal Crossing and Minecraft, which is kind of the thing about Pokopia. Even though it's not my style of game, I do understand that when these games click, they oftentimes explode in popularity. And if anything else, there's always a lot of Pokemon mods for Minecraft, so to have an official Pokemon Minecraft-esque game does have a lot of potential on paper. However, when they first revealed it last year, I don't know, it just didn't really pop off screen, but now that they've given us a deeper dive into its gameplay, it actually does look pretty good, and so much so that a lot of people are walking away thinking that this could actually end up being a big surprise hit when it launches next month on March 5th. So, we'll see what happens, but fans definitely seem to be excited. All right, now let's just go and talk about these PlayStation stories, though, because there's a few big things happening right now, including more details about the Bluepoint closure. Now, I firmly believe this is one of the worst closures in gaming history, because the mismanagement is beyond palpable, in my opinion. Sony acquired Bluepoint because of their high-quality remakes. Really, you can make an argument that they had some of the best remakes of all time. And then for whatever reason, after Sony acquired them, they instead worked on a live service God of War project that should have never been greenlit in the first place. And sadly, after that, they never got another chance to redeem themselves. I just cannot imagine a studio as talented as Bluepoint couldn't pitch some games that Sony would be happy with. Whatever the case may be, though, Detective Seeds put out a big story on Twitter. Allegedly, he was able to contact some of their previous employees on LinkedIn about what happened, and according to his information, Sony rejected their pitches, including a Bloodborne remake, a Jak and Daxter remake, a Resistance remake, and even an updated PlayStation 5 version of Shadow of the Colossus with some new content. Now, if this is actually true, it is crazy to think that none of these made it through to the next phase. But somehow, Sony thought it was a good idea to greenlight something like a God of War live service project. So if Sony actually rejected these projects, which includes some fan favorites that fans have been begging for years and years, seriously, I do not understand how Hermen Hulst still has a job. How in the world could he greenlight a live service God of War project and think that's a good idea, but refuse to greenlight something like a Bloodborne remake, which obviously has a lot of requests for online? I think that is criminal if this is all true. But admittedly, that is a part of the story that we need to talk about, because it has been pointed out that Detective Seeds has a spotty track record. He has made various claims in the past that has not proven to be true. So because of that, there are questions about whether or not this report is even accurate, or if it's just for internet clout. And if anything else, Nate the Hate, which does have a proven track record, responded by saying that there are some truth mixed into this report and what he's claiming. Now, however, he also said that a lot of it doesn't align with what he's been told either. So I do think that there needs to be more corroboration for this report before we take it as 100% legitimate. I think we still need more information from other insiders as well that do have a better track record. But again, if any of these 4 games were actually pitched and rejected by Sony, which it kind of seems like there is a good chance of that, then my goodness, fans will be calling for Hermen Hulst's job, and I think rightfully so. It kind of feels like Sony's leadership needs a reset by this point. They need to deliver the games that their core fans are actually asking for, which all 4 of these games very much fit into that category. Now, one more thing before we go, though, because we also got another leak from the often leaky Jeff Grubb. It kind of feels like it's been a little while since I've covered him, but he mentioned something very interesting, and that is that Sony got Gran Turismo 7 running on the Switch 2. Okay, Sony has already ported a few games to Nintendo consoles these past few years, but Gran Turismo? That's a whole different beast than something like, let's say, Patapon. Patapon is a small niche series, whereas Gran Turismo is quite literally Sony's best-selling franchise of all time with more than 100 million units sold. So even though it is technically, yes, a live service game by the definition, it is still a pillar franchise for Sony that's been with them for a very long time. And if it were to be ported to the Switch 2, then that would be breaking news on various different levels. However, it is important to keep in mind that just because Sony got it running on the Switch 2, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is coming to the Switch 2. It could have been for test purposes for, let's just say, Sony's handheld that is currently in development. Maybe they wanted to use the Switch 2 as a baseline. So like I said, this is not necessarily a confirmation that is coming to Nintendo, but it is still very interesting nonetheless, because at bare minimum, it does sound like it is a possibility if Sony decides that they want to go in that direction, which, I mean, it would make them a lot of money. So let me know what you all think about this story. Now, personally, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but I'd still like to hear from you all in the comments below. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.